The moment Lily Chun mentioned her mother's tattoo, billionaire Marcus Blackwood's crystal champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor of his private dining room. The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the exclusive restaurant, the waitstaff, the sommelier, the maitre d', the other patrons at nearby tables, turned to stare at the man who had just gone white as death at the words of 22-year-old Waitress in a wrinkled uniform. Lily stood frozen beside Marcus's table, her notepad trembling in her hand, watching the most powerful man in the city react to her casual comment as if she had just told him the world was ending. "I'm so sorry about the glass," she whispered, already calculating how much the crystal would cost to replace and whether she could afford the deduction from her paycheck. "I'll clean it up immediately. I'll pay for—" "What did you say?" Marcus interrupted, his voice barely audible but carrying an intensity that made everyone in the room lean closer. "About your mother's tattoo?" Lily's heart hammered as she realized she had somehow said something wrong, something that had transformed the charming billionaire philanthropist into a man who looked like he was seeing a ghost. I said my mother has a tattoo like yours," Lily repeated hesitantly, gesturing toward the small symbol visible on Marcus's wrist where his expensive suit sleeve had pulled back. "A phoenix, rising from flames. She got it when she was young, before I was born. She always said it represented hope rising from ashes." Marcus stared at Lily as if she had just spoken in a language he hadn't heard in decades. His dark eyes that graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune magazines, eyes that had intimidated corporate rivals and charmed world leaders, were now wide with something that looked like terror. "Your mother," he said slowly, his voice cracking on the words. "What's her name?" "Sarah Chun." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Around them, the restaurant's usual dinner service had come to a complete halt. Servers stood motionless with trays in their hands. Patrons had stopped eating to watch the unfolding drama. Even the soft jazz music that usually filled the space seemed muted by the tension radiating from Marcus's table. Lily took a step backward, instinctively recognizing danger even though she didn't understand its source. "Mr. Blackwood, are you okay? Should I call someone? A doctor?" But Marcus wasn't hearing her questions. He was 23 years old again, standing in a dingy tattoo parlor in San Francisco's Mission District, holding the hand of the most beautiful woman he had ever seen as they both got matching phoenix tattoos to commemorate surviving a tragedy that had nearly destroyed them both. He was remembering Sarah Chen's laugh, her smile, the way she looked at him like he was her entire world. He was remembering the fight that ended everything between them. Harsh words spoken in anger, doors slammed, promises broken. He was remembering walking away from the only woman he had ever loved because his father's business empire was more important than following his heart. And he was realizing that the young woman standing before him, with Sarah's dark eyes, Sarah's delicate features, Sarah's unconscious grace, was wearing his face. "How old are you?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 22, Lily replied, confusion and concern evident in her tone. Marcus felt the world tilt around him as he performed the terrible mathematics. 22 years old, Sarah Chen's daughter. His phoenix tattoo. "When's your birthday?" "Mr. Blackwood, I really think you need medical attention. You look like you're having some kind of, when is your birthday?" Marcus repeated with desperate urgency that made Lily take another step back. "September 15th, she said reluctantly. Marcus closed his eyes, the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place with devastating clarity. September 15th, 9 months after their last night together. 9 months after he had chosen his inheritance over love and walked away from Sarah Chun forever. When Marcus opened his eyes, tears were streaming down his face. An emotional display so unprecedented that several diners pulled out their phones to record the moment when one of America's most powerful men broke down in public. "Lily," he said, his voice breaking completely, "I need you to sit down." "Sir, I'm working. I can't, please." The word came out as a broken plea. "Please sit down. There's something I need to tell you. Something about your mother. Something about—" Marcus looked at this beautiful young woman who carried his eyes, his stubborn chin, his unconscious way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "Something about you." Lily remained standing, But the notepad fell from her nerveless fingers as she saw something in Marcus Blackwood's expression that made her understand she was about to learn something that would change her life forever. The entire restaurant held its breath, sensing they were witnessing a moment of revelation that would be talked about for years. Marcus Blackwood, the man who owned half of Silicon Valley, who had donated millions to charity, who had been featured on magazine covers as one of the world's most eligible bachelors, looked at the waitress serving his table and spoke words that would shatter everything either of them thought they knew about their lives. "Lily, I think I'm your father." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Lily's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally something that looked like recognition as she studied Marcus's features and saw her own reflected back at her. Around them, the restaurant erupted in whispers, gasps, and the quiet clicking of phone cameras capturing the moment when a billionaire discovered he had a daughter he never knew existed. But Marcus's attention was focused entirely on Lily, this young woman who had been struggling in poverty while he built an empire, this daughter who had grown up without a father while he lived in mansions and traveled in private jets. "I need to see her," Marcus said, his voice filled with 22 years of regret. "I need to see Sarah. I need to." He stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward, the sound echoing through the silent restaurant. "I need to make this right. If you think this story is just about a surprising family reunion, you're wrong. If you think this ends with a simple reconciliation and happy tears, you're wrong." What Marcus Blackwood discovers about Sarah Chen's life, about the struggles she faced, the secrets she kept, and the sacrifices she made to raise their daughter alone, will force him to confront the true cost of the choices he made 23 years ago. Stay close. Keep watching. Wait, before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to this channel. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's continue. Because sometimes the most expensive mistakes are the ones that cost you the people you love. And sometimes redemption requires more than money can buy. Lily Chun had been working 3 jobs since she was 16 years old, and she had never once complained about the exhaustion that followed her like a shadow. Every morning at 5 a.m., she cleaned office buildings in downtown San Francisco before most of the city woke up. Every afternoon, she tutored high school students in mathematics at the community center. And every evening, she waited tables at Meridian, the upscale restaurant where Marcus Blackwood had just turned her world upside down with 3 impossible words. The money from all 3 jobs barely covered their tiny apartment's rent, her mother's medical expenses, and the community college classes Lily took at night in hopes of eventually earning a degree in nursing. There was never enough left over for luxuries, rarely enough for anything beyond basic survival. But Lily had never resented the grind because she understood why it was necessary. Her mother, Sarah Chun, lived with chronic pain from a car accident that had happened when Lily was 8 years old. The accident had ended Sarah's career as a graphic designer, crushed 3 vertebrae in her spine, and left her dependent on medications that cost more each month than most people paid for rent. What Lily didn't know, what Sarah had carefully hidden for 14 years, was that the car accident had happened while Sarah was rushing to a second job interview, desperately trying to earn enough money to provide for her daughter after the man she loved had abandoned them both. Lily had grown up believing her father was a college boyfriend who had died in a motorcycle accident before she was born. It was a story Sarah had crafted to protect her daughter from the more painful truth, that Lily's father was very much alive, incredibly wealthy, and had chosen his family's business empire over the woman who carried his child. The phoenix tattoo on Sarah's shoulder, the one that matched the symbol Lily had noticed on Marcus Blackwood's wrist, was the only physical reminder of the love affair that had created Lily and destroyed Sarah's faith in happy endings. Standing in that restaurant, watching Marcus Blackwood stare at her with tears in his eyes, Lily felt the careful structure of everything she believed about her life beginning to collapse. Sarah Chun had been 21 years old when she met Marcus Blackwood at a coffee shop near UC Berkeley, where she was finishing her degree in graphic design and he was completing his MBA. She had been sketching in her notebook, detailed drawings of urban landscapes that captured the beauty hidden in everyday scenes, when Marcus approached her table and asked if he could buy her coffee in exchange for watching her work. "You see things differently," he had said, studying her drawings with genuine appreciation. "You find art where most people see nothing but concrete and steel." Their courtship had been intense, passionate, and completely inappropriate by the standards of Marcus's family. The Blackwoods were old San Francisco money, tech industry pioneers who had built their fortune during the first dot-com boom and maintained their position through strategic investments and carefully cultivated political connections. They lived in Pacific Heights mansions, attended exclusive charity galas, and maintained social circles that didn't include the daughter of Chinese immigrants who worked in a Chinatown restaurant. But Marcus had been different then. Idealistic, romantic, genuinely convinced that love was more important than social status or family approval. He spent hours listening to Sarah's dreams of starting her own design firm. He supported her ambitions, encouraged her creativity, and made her believe that together they could build something beautiful regardless of what his family thought. They had gotten the matching phoenix tattoos after surviving a traumatic experience that had bonded them forever, a fire in Sarah's apartment building that had nearly killed them both. They had escaped through a window, clinging to each other as flames consumed everything Sarah owned, and had decided the next morning that rising from ashes was the perfect metaphor for their love. "Whatever happens to us," Marcus had said as they sat in the tattoo parlor, "we'll always have this reminder that we survived something terrible together." The tattoos were supposed to be symbols of their unbreakable bond. Instead, they became reminders of promises that Marcus wasn't strong enough to keep. The end came during Marcus's final semester at business school, when his father, Robert Blackwood, made Marcus an offer that was really an ultimatum. Join the family business immediately after graduation, marry someone from an appropriate family, and inherit controlling interest in Blackwood Industries, Robert had said during a tense dinner at the family's Pacific Heights estate. Or continue this ridiculous infatuation with a Chinese girl and forfeit any claim to your inheritance. Marcus had tried to fight for Sarah, had spent weeks arguing with his father about love versus duty, about building his own life versus continuing the family legacy. But Robert Blackwood had been manipulating people for 40 years, and he knew exactly how to apply pressure where his son was most vulnerable. The business employs 1,400 people, Marcus. If you walk away, if I'm forced to sell to competitors, what happens to those families? What happens to the innovative research projects we fund? What happens to the charitable foundations that depend on our donations? Robert had made Marcus's choice seem like a decision between personal happiness and social responsibility. "Sarah will be fine without you," Robert had continued. "Young women are resilient. She'll find someone else, build a different life." But the people who depend on Blackwood Industries, the employees, the researchers, the charities, they can't replace what we provide. Marcus had convinced himself that walking away from Sarah was a noble sacrifice for the greater good. He had no idea that Sarah was pregnant. She had discovered her pregnancy 2 weeks after Marcus broke up with her in a coffee shop, the same coffee shop where they had first met, with a speech about incompatible life goals and different paths that had shattered her heart while protecting his inheritance. Sarah had tried to contact Marcus when she realized she was carrying his child, but Robert Blackwood's security team had made sure her calls never reached his son. Her letters were intercepted. Her attempts to visit his office were blocked by receptionists who had been instructed to keep her away. By the time Sarah realized that Marcus's family was systematically preventing her from reaching him, pride and pain had hardened her heart against ever trying again. She would raise their daughter alone, teach her to be strong and self-sufficient, and never let her know that her father was the kind of man who could be bought with threats about social responsibility. Marcus Blackwood had spent 23 years trying to convince himself that he had made the right choice. He had built Blackwood Industries into a technology empire worth $12 billion. He had revolutionized 3 different industries through strategic acquisitions and innovative development. He had donated hundreds of millions to charitable causes and created jobs for over 40,000 people worldwide. But he had never married. He had never found another woman who looked at him the way Sarah had looked at him, as if he was someone worth loving rather than someone worth using for social advancement or financial gain. He had dated extensively, been photographed with actresses and socialites and tech industry luminaries, been featured on magazine covers as one of the world's most eligible bachelors. But every relationship had ended the same way, with Marcus comparing every woman to a memory of Sarah Chun that he couldn't forget, no matter how many years passed or how much success he accumulated. The phoenix tattoo on his wrist had faded over time, touched up by expensive tattoo artists who never asked. about its significance. But the meaning behind it had only grown stronger. A constant reminder of the love he had sacrificed for wealth that no longer seemed worth the price he had paid. Marcus had told himself that Sarah was better off without him, that she had probably married someone who could give her the kind of uncomplicated love he had proven incapable of providing. He had never imagined that she might have been raising his child alone while he built an empire on the foundation of their destroyed relationship. Standing in Meridian Restaurant, staring at a young woman who carried his eyes and Sarah's grace, Marcus felt 23 years of carefully suppressed guilt crash down on him like a building collapse. Lily was beautiful, intelligent, hard-working. Everything he would have wanted in a daughter if he had been brave enough to choose love over legacy. Wait, subscribe to this channel right now. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Let's continue. But she was also exhausted, financially struggling, working multiple jobs to survive while he lived in a penthouse apartment and traveled in private jets. She was also a stranger. His daughter was a stranger who knew nothing about him except that he was rich, powerful, and had just claimed to be her father in front of a room full of witnesses. "I need to go," Lily said suddenly, her voice tight with shock and confusion. "I need to go home. I need to talk to my mother." "Lily, wait, no." She backed away from him, her professional composure finally cracking. "I need to process this. I need to understand what you're telling me, what it means, what." Her voice broke, and Marcus saw tears building in her eyes, tears that he had caused with his revelation, just as he had once caused tears in Sarah's eyes with his abandonment. "I'll drive you home," Marcus said, reaching for his coat. "We can talk. I can explain. You can't drive me home," Lily replied, the absurdity of the situation apparently striking her for the first time. "You're Marcus Blackwood. You probably have bodyguards and drivers, and people who arrange your entire life. You can't just show up at my apartment building like a normal person." She was right, and Marcus realized for the first time how the enormous machinery of wealth and power he had built around himself would complicate any relationship with the daughter he had just discovered. "Then tell me how," Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Tell me how to talk to Sarah. Tell me how to be part of your life if you let me. Tell me how to fix this." Lily looked at him, this powerful man who was begging her for guidance like a lost child, and saw something that reminded her of herself when she was young and scared and didn't understand why the world was so complicated. "My mother gets home from physical therapy at 9 o'clock, she said quietly. "If you want to see her, if you want to explain whatever happened between you 23 years ago, come to our apartment then." "But Mr. Blackwood, Marcus, please call me Marcus. Marcus, if you hurt her again, if you make her cry, if you cause her any more pain than you've already caused, I will make sure every person in this restaurant knows exactly what kind of man you really are." The threat should have been laughable. A struggling waitress threatening one of the most powerful men in the country. Instead, Marcus found himself nodding with respect for this young woman who protected her mother the way he should have protected Sarah 23 years ago. "I understand," he said quietly. "And Lily? I know I have no right to ask this, but don't tell her I'm coming. I want to see her face when she realizes I know about you. I want to look her in the eyes when I apologize for the biggest mistake of my life." Lily studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Our address is 847 Valencia Street, apartment 3B, 9 o'clock. As Lily walked away from his table, leaving Marcus alone with the shattered crystal and the stunned restaurant patrons, she had no idea that she had just set in motion a confrontation 23 years in the making. A confrontation that would force Sarah Chun to face the man who had broken her heart. A confrontation that would force Marcus Blackwood to confront the true cost of choosing wealth over love. And a confrontation that would either heal a fractured family or destroy the fragile peace that Sarah and Lily had built together. At exactly 9 p.m., Marcus Blackwood stood outside apartment 3B at 847 Valencia Street, holding his breath as he raised his hand to knock on a door that would either heal his greatest regret or confirm that some mistakes were too devastating to forgive. The building was everything his Pacific Heights penthouse was not: cramped, worn, filled with the sounds of families living on top of each other in spaces never meant to house so many dreams deferred by economic reality. The hallways smelled of cooking spices, cigarette smoke, and the industrial disinfectant used to mask decades of financial struggle. Marcus had spent the 3 hours since leaving the restaurant in his car outside the building, watching tenants come and go while wrestling with what he would say to Sarah Chun after 23 years of silence. How do you apologize for abandoning the woman you loved because you were too weak to stand up to family pressure? How do you explain that not a day had passed without thinking about her, wondering if she was happy, regretting the choice that had defined every empty relationship since? Most importantly, how do you ask for forgiveness when you've just discovered that your cowardice had left her to raise your child alone in poverty while you built an empire worth billions? Marcus knocked softly, his heart hammering so hard he was certain the entire building could hear it. Footsteps approached the door, cautious, measured, the steps of someone who had learned to be careful about unexpected visitors. The door opened to reveal Sarah Chun. 23 years had changed her, but not in the ways Marcus had expected. She was still beautiful. Perhaps more beautiful than he remembered, with silver threading through her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter despite everything life had thrown at her. But there was a wariness in her posture that hadn't existed when they were young, a careful way she held herself that suggested someone who had learned not to trust easily. She was wearing scrubs, pale blue hospital scrubs that made Marcus realize she was working again, despite the chronic pain that Lily had mentioned. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the threshold of her apartment. Two people who had once known every detail of each other's thoughts, now searching for any trace of familiarity in faces marked by decades of separate experiences. "Hello, Sarah," Marcus said quietly. Sarah's expression went through a series of emotions: surprise, recognition, pain, and finally something that looked like resignation. "Marcus!" Her voice was steady, controlled, giving away nothing of what she was feeling. "Lily said you might be coming by. May I come in?" Sarah hesitated, her hand still gripping the door frame as if she needed physical support to remain standing. "That depends. Are you here as Marcus Blackwood the billionaire, or as Marcus Chen's father?" The question hit Marcus with unexpected force. She hadn't called him by his first name. She had called him by his public identity, the persona he wore from magazine covers and business negotiations. "I'm here as the man who made the biggest mistake of his life 23 years ago," he replied. "I'm here as someone who needs to apologize and doesn't know if it's possible to make amends for something so." His voice broke as he saw Lily emerge from what must have been the kitchen, her eyes red from crying, but her expression fierce with protective love for her mother. "So what, Marcus?" Sarah asked. "So unforgivable? So devastating? So completely selfish?" The words were delivered without anger, which somehow made them more cutting than if she had screamed at him. "Yes," Marcus said simply. "All of that." Sarah studied his face for another long moment, then stepped aside to let him enter. "You have 10 minutes, she said. "Then I want you to leave, and I want you to never contact either of us again, unless Lily specifically requests it." Marcus stepped into the small apartment, immediately understanding how Lily could work 3 jobs and still struggle to make rent. The living room was barely large enough for a couch, a coffee table, and a television that looked like it was at least a decade old. But Sarah had made the space beautiful in ways that no amount of money could buy. Art on the walls, plants in hand-painted pots, books stacked everywhere with careful attention to both function and aesthetics. It was a home created by someone who understood that beauty mattered even when resources were limited. "Sit down," Sarah said, gesturing toward the couch. "But don't get comfortable." Marcus sat, acutely aware that this was probably the most expensive suit that had ever entered this apartment, that his watch cost more than Sarah and Lily's rent for a year, that everything about his presence here was an intrusion of wealth into lives that had been shaped by its absence. Lily remained standing near the kitchen doorway, clearly intending to protect her mother from whatever emotional damage Marcus might inflict. "Sarah," Marcus began, "I know there's nothing I can say that will undo 23 years of—" "You're right," Sarah interrupted. "There isn't. So don't waste time apologizing. Tell me what you want." The directness of her response threw Marcus off balance. He had prepared for anger, for tears, for emotional confrontation. He hadn't prepared for the cool professionalism of someone who had survived devastating betrayal and emerged stronger. "I want to understand what happened after I left. I want to know about Lily. I want to know if there's any way I can be part of her life, part of your life, if you'll allow it." Sarah laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "You want to understand what happened after you left. You want to know about the daughter you abandoned before she was even born." "I didn't know." Marcus said desperately. Sarah, I swear to you, I didn't know you were pregnant. If I had known, you didn't know because you didn't want to know, Sarah replied with deadly calm. You made your choice, Marcus. You chose your father's money over our relationship. You chose social status over love. You chose the easy path of wealth and privilege over the hard work of building something real. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes as the full weight of Sarah's pain became clear. You're right. I was weak. I was scared. I let my father manipulate me into believing that keeping the family business intact was more important than keeping our relationship intact. And now, Lily spoke for the first time since Marcus had entered. What's different now? What makes you think we want your guilt money or your sudden interest in being a father? Marcus looked at Lily, this beautiful, intelligent young woman who was protecting her mother the way he should have protected Sarah, and realized that simply showing up with apologies and offers of financial support would insult everything they had built together. I don't want to give you guilt money, he said quietly. I want to understand who you are, who your mother raised you to be. I want to learn about the life you've built without me. And I want to see if there's any way I can earn the right to be part of it. Earn the right. Sarah's voice carried the first hint of real emotion since he had arrived. Marcus, you gave up the right to be part of our lives when you walked away without a single conversation about our future together. That was when Marcus realized there was something he didn't understand about their breakup. Something in Sarah's tone that suggested his memory of events might be incomplete. Sarah, when I broke up with you, when I told you we had different life paths, when you told me our relationship was a youthful mistake that you needed to outgrow for the sake of your real responsibilities, Sarah corrected, her voice hardening with remembered pain. Marcus stared at her, confusion replacing certainty. That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. In that coffee shop where we first met, you said dating someone from my background was something you had to get out of your system before you could focus on building a serious life with someone more appropriate. The blood drained from Marcus's face. I never said those words, Sarah. I would never have said those words. Then you've blocked them out along with everything else that was inconvenient about loving someone beneath your social status. But Marcus was shaking his head with growing urgency. Sarah, I broke up with you, yes. But I never said anything about your background. I never said you were inappropriate. I told you we had incompatible life goals, that I was being pressured to take over the family business immediately, that I couldn't ask you to wait while I figured out how to balance family expectations with personal happiness. Sarah went very still, studying Marcus's face with the careful attention of someone trying to detect deception. You said I was a phase. You said dating me was something you had to get out of your system. I never said that. Marcus was on his feet now, moving towards Sarah despite Lily's protective stance. Sarah, who told you I said that? Where did you hear those words? The question hung in the air like a lit fuse. Sarah's expression was shifting from anger to confusion to something that looked like terrible understanding. Your father, she said slowly. Your father called me the day after you broke up with me. Wait, subscribe to this channel right now. Trust me, you want to see how this ends. Let's continue. You wanted to make sure I understood why you had ended our relationship. Marcus felt the world tilting as pieces of a 23-year-old puzzle began falling into place. What exactly did my father tell you? He said you were embarrassed about having been seen with me at family events. He said you realized you needed to date someone more sophisticated, someone who could help your career instead of holding it back. He said you were relieved to have an excuse to end things, but were too polite to tell me the real reason. Marcus's legs gave out. He sank back onto the couch, his face white with horror and understanding. Oh God. Oh my God, Sarah. He lied to you. What? My father lied to you. I never said any of those things. I broke up with you because he threatened to disinherit me if I didn't join the family business immediately, but I would never have. Marcus looked up at Sarah and Lily, both of whom were staring at him with expressions of growing shock. Sarah, I loved you. I was going to propose. I had bought a ring. I was planning to propose after graduation and ask you to marry me regardless of what my family thought. The silence that followed was deafening. You're lying, Sarah whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. I still have the ring, Marcus said quietly. I've carried it with me for 23 years because I could never bring myself to return it or give it to anyone else. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that looked worn from decades of handling. Sarah stared at the box as if it were a grenade. Sarah, Marcus continued, his voice breaking. "I thought you never tried to contact me after our breakup because you agreed that our relationship was over. I thought you had moved on, found someone else, built a life without me. I tried to call you for 3 months," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Your assistant said you were too busy to take calls. Your security guards escorted me out of your office building. The letters I sent were returned unopened." Marcus felt 23 years of carefully constructed assumptions crumbling around him. "I never received any calls. I never saw any letters. No one told me you were trying to contact me." Lily was looking between her parents, because that's what they were, her parents, with growing horror as she realized the scope of the deception that had shaped her entire life. "You're saying Grandfather Robert prevented you from communicating with each other?" she asked. "I'm saying my father manipulated both of us," Marcus replied, his voice thick with rage that had been building for 23 years without a target. "He lied to me about your attempts to contact me. He lied to you about my reasons for ending our relationship. He orchestrated our separation because he didn't want his son married to someone he considered beneath our social status." Sarah was crying now, tears she had held back for over 2 decades finally finding release. "Marcus, if I had known, if I had understood, you would have told me about Lily. I would have fought harder. I would have found a way to reach you. I would have made sure you knew about our daughter." Marcus moved to sit beside Sarah on the couch, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. "Sarah, I am so sorry. Not just for the breakup, not just for the years we lost, but for my father's cruelty. For the lies he told us both. For the way he destroyed our family before it could even begin." Sarah looked at him through her tears, seeing not the billionaire who had supposedly rejected her, but the young man she had loved who had been as much a victim of manipulation as she was. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "How do we move forward from this?" Marcus looked at Sarah, then at Lily, then back at the engagement ring he had carried for 23 years as a reminder of the love he thought he had chosen to sacrifice. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I want to find out, if you'll let me." That was when Lily spoke up with words that would change all of their lives forever. "There's something else you need to know," she said quietly. "Something we haven't told you about why Mom needs medical care, why she's been working despite her chronic pain." Marcus and Sarah both turned to look at Lily, who was struggling with a secret she had been carrying alone. "Mom's cancer came back 6 months ago. The treatment costs, we can't afford them. She's been working extra shifts at the hospital where she gets her care because they give employee discounts on medical procedures." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah was dying. The woman he had loved for 23 years, the mother of his daughter, was fighting for her life while struggling to afford the treatment that could save her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked Lily, her voice filled with hurt. "Because you would have refused treatment to save money for my college tuition," Lily replied. "Because you would have chosen my future over your life, the same way you've chosen my well-being over your own for 22 years. Marcus felt something break open in his chest, not just grief for the time they had lost, but determination to ensure they didn't lose anymore. "What kind of treatment do you need?" he asked Sarah. "Marcus, no. We're not your responsibility. You're the mother of my daughter," Marcus interrupted. "You're the woman I never stopped loving. You're the family I thought I had lost forever. If you think I'm going to let pride or independence keep me from helping you fight for your life, you're wrong." Sarah looked at him with an expression that mixed hope with fear. "It's experimental therapy. Insurance won't cover it. The total cost is around $400,000. Then we start treatment tomorrow," Marcus said without hesitation. "Marcus, Sarah, I've spent 23 years building a fortune I never wanted, working for a company my father forced me to take over, living a life that felt empty because the people I loved weren't in it." Marcus reached for Sarah's hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Let me use that wealth for something that matters. Let me use it to save your life, to secure Lily's future, to build the family we should have had if my father hadn't destroyed it." Sarah looked at their joined hands, hands that had once fit together perfectly, hands that bore matching phoenix tattoos, hands that had been separated by lies but were now finding their way back to each other. "And after that, after the treatment, after the crisis passes, what happens to us?" Marcus lifted Sarah's hand to his lips and kissed the phoenix tattoo that had faded but never disappeared. "After that, we figure out how to rise from the ashes," he said quietly. "Together." The call came at 3 a.m., 3 days after Marcus had promised Sarah he would pay for her cancer treatment. Lily's voice was shaking so badly Marcus could barely understand her words through the phone. She collapsed. Mom collapsed at work, and they rushed her to UCSF Medical Center. Wait, subscribe to this channel right now. Trust me, you want to see how this ends. Let's continue. The doctors are saying, we might have waited too long to start treatment, but the cancer has spread faster than they expected. Marcus was out of his Pacific Heights penthouse and in his car before Lily finished speaking, his heart hammering with a terror he hadn't felt since he was 23 years old and watching flames consume everything Sarah owned. The drive to the hospital took 12 minutes, but each red light felt like an eternity of imagining a future where Sarah died before he could make amends for 23 years of lost time. He found Lily in the hospital waiting room, still wearing her scrubs from the night shift she'd been working when Sarah collapsed. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands trembling as she clutched a coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago. "How is she?" Marcus asked, sitting beside his daughter, a word that still felt foreign and precious every time he thought it. "Stable, but barely. Dr. Martinez says the experimental treatment we discussed might not be enough anymore. The cancer has metastasized to her liver and lungs. She needs immediate surgery, followed by a more aggressive chemotherapy protocol that isn't even available in the United States." Marcus felt the walls closing around them, but he forced his voice to remain calm. "What treatment? Where is it available?" "There's a clinical trial at the Mayo Clinic, but the waiting list is 6 months long. There's an experimental therapy in Germany that has shown promising results, but it costs nearly $1 million and requires her to be there for 3 months. Lily looked at Marcus with desperation that broke his heart. "I know you said you would help with treatment costs, but this is beyond anything we could have imagined." Marcus reached for Lily's hand, feeling the calluses from her 3 jobs and the tremor of exhaustion that came from working 18-hour days. "Lily, listen to me carefully. There is no amount of money, no treatment option, no experimental therapy that I won't pursue if it can save your mother's life. We get her the best care available anywhere in the world, and we get it immediately. But the German clinic, even if they accept her, even if the treatment works, what if she dies there? What if I never see her again? What if—" Lily's composure finally broke completely. "Wait, subscribe to this channel right now. Trust me, you want to see how this ends. Let's continue." She collapsed against Marcus, sobbing with the kind of grief that comes from watching the most important person in your life slip away. Marcus held his daughter, really held her for the first time, and felt 22 years of missed moments crash over him like a wave. He should have been there for her first steps, her first day of school, her first heartbreak. He should have been the one protecting her and Sarah from exactly this kind of terror. "We're going with her," Marcus said quietly. Lily pulled back to look at him. "What? If Sarah agrees to the German treatment, we're going with her. All of us. I'll arrange for medical transport, private nursing staff, whatever she needs. You won't face this alone, and neither will she." "Marcus, I can't just leave. I have jobs, responsibilities. You have a mother who needs you. Everything else can be replaced, rearranged, or postponed. Your mother's life cannot." As Marcus spoke, he realized that offering to uproot their lives and move to Germany wasn't just about medical care. It was about becoming the family they should have been 23 years ago. But before he could explain this to Lily, his phone buzzed with a call that made his blood run cold. His father, Robert Blackwood. "Don't answer it," Lily said, seeing Marcus's expression. "Whatever he wants, whoever he is, it's my father," Marcus replied grimly. "And the fact that he's calling at 3:30 in the morning means he already knows I'm here." Marcus accepted the call with dread that had been building for 3 days, ever since he realized Robert was responsible for destroying his relationship with Sarah. "Marcus!" Robert's voice was crisp, controlled, carrying the authority of a man who had spent decades manipulating his son. "I understand you've been seen at the hospital. I hope you haven't made any commitments you'll regret. What do you want, Robert? I want you to remember who you are, what you represent, the responsibilities you have to the company, to the family legacy, to the shareholders who depend on your leadership." Marcus felt Lily watching him as he spoke to the grandfather she had never met, the man whose lies had stolen her father from her before she was born. "I remember exactly who I am. The question is whether you remember what you did 23 years ago." There was a pause before Robert responded. I remember making difficult decisions to protect our family's future. Decisions you're now threatening to undo with this sentimental reunion with a woman who represents everything we've worked to build beyond. Sarah represents the only thing I've ever loved more than the company you forced me to inherit. Love, Robert laughed bitterly. Marcus, you're 55 years old. This middle-aged infatuation with your college girlfriend is embarrassing enough without adding her medical bills to the public spectacle. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, not just at his father's cruelty, but at the realization that Robert saw Sarah's cancer as an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. Her name is Sarah Chun. She's the mother of your granddaughter. And if you ever refer to her as anything less than the woman whose life you destroyed with your manipulation, I will make sure every business partner, every investor, every board member knows exactly how you built this empire on lies. Threats, Marcus? How unlike you. Not threats. Promises. I've spent 3 days learning what you kept from me 23 years ago. The lies you told Sarah. The communications you intercepted. The systematic way you destroyed our relationship because you couldn't stand the idea of your son loving someone you considered beneath our social status. Robert was quiet for a long moment. And now? Now you're planning to abandon everything we've built for the chance to play house with a dying woman and her daughter. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. But what surprised him was Lily's reaction. She stood up, walked to Marcus, and took the phone from his hand. Mr. Blackwood, Lily said, her voice carrying a strength that reminded Marcus powerfully of Sarah. This is your granddaughter. Another pause, longer this time. I see. And I suppose you want something from me, young woman. I want you to know that your son, my father, is a better man than you raised him to be. He's choosing love over money, family over business, people over profit. Everything you apparently try to teach him not to value. Lily's voice was getting stronger, more confident with each word. And I want you to know that if you try to interfere with our family again, if you try to hurt my mother or manipulate my father the way you did 23 years ago, you'll discover that some of us learn how to fight back. She ended the call and handed the phone back to Marcus with an expression of fierce protectiveness that made him understand she was truly his daughter. I'm sorry, Marcus said. You shouldn't have had to deal with, I've been taking care of my mother for my entire life, Lily replied. I know how to recognize people who try to hurt the people I love, and I know how to make sure they don't succeed. But even as Marcus felt pride in Lily's strength, he realized that Robert's call had exposed a vulnerability they hadn't considered. Lily, my father still has significant control over Blackwood Industries. If he chooses to make our situation public, if he uses the company's resources to interfere with Sarah's treatment or our relationship, then we fight back, Lily said simply. The three of us, together. The family he tried to prevent from existing. Marcus looked at his daughter, this incredible young woman who had inherited Sarah's beauty and his own stubborn determination, and realized that somewhere in the space of 3 days, they had become exactly what Robert feared most. A united family that valued each other more than wealth or social status. Dr. Martinez emerged from Sarah's room as dawn was breaking over San Francisco, her expression cautiously hopeful. She's awake, Dr. Martinez said. Weak but stable. The emergency surgery was successful. We were able to remove the tumor that was pressing against her liver. But she's going to need aggressive treatment immediately. The German clinic? Marcus asked. I've been in contact with Dr. Weber in Munich. He's reviewed Sarah's case and agreed to accept her into the experimental program. But Marcus, Dr. Martinez paused, her expression growing serious. You need to understand that this treatment is experimental. There are no guarantees, and the side effects can be severe. What kind of side effects? Extreme fatigue, immune system suppression, possible organ damage. Some patients experience memory issues, personality changes. Sarah could go through months of treatment and emerge different than she is now. Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He was asking Sarah to risk not just her life, but potentially her identity for a chance at survival. But without treatment, Lily asked quietly, without treatment, she has perhaps 3 months. The stark reality settled around them like a shroud. Marcus looked through the window into Sarah's room, where she was sleeping with the pale fragility of someone whose body was fighting a battle it might not win. Can I see her? Dr. Martinez nodded. She's been asking for both of you. Marcus and Lily entered Sarah's room together, and Sarah's eyes opened immediately, as if she had been waiting for their presence to allow herself to rest. "How are my two favorite people?" Sarah asked, her voice weak, but carrying the warmth that had first captured Marcus's heart 23 years ago. "We're scared," Lily said honestly, taking her mother's hand. "But we're together." Sarah looked at Marcus, and he saw something in her expression that made his pulse quicken. Not just gratitude for his help, but something deeper that looked like the love they had shared when they were young. "Marcus, Dr. Martinez told me about the German treatment, about the costs, the risks, the time commitment." "Sarah, we can afford whatever. That's not what I'm worried about," Sarah interrupted gently. "I'm worried about you and Lily spending 3 months watching me possibly die in a foreign country. I'm worried about the treatment changing who I am. I'm worried about putting you both through something that might not work." Marcus moved closer to her bed, reaching for her free hand. "Sarah, 3 days ago, I thought I had lost you forever because of my father's lies. I'm not going to lose you again to cancer without fighting with everything I have. And if the treatment doesn't work? If I die anyway?" Marcus looked into Sarah's eyes that had haunted his dreams for 23 years, and gave her the only answer that mattered. "Then we'll have spent your last months together, as a family, the way we should have spent the last 23 years. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time since Marcus had found her again, they were tears of hope rather than pain. "Lily," Sarah said, turning to their daughter, "what do you think? Are you willing to put your life on hold for 3 months while your mother fights for her life with experimental treatments?" Lily squeezed both her parents' hands, and Marcus felt the circle of their family closing around them like armor against everything that had tried to destroy them. "Mom," Lily said quietly, "I've been putting my life on hold for 3 years waiting for you to get better. At least in Germany, we'll be putting our lives on hold together." Sarah looked between Marcus and Lily, the two people who meant everything to her, and made the decision that would define whatever time they had left. "Then let's go to Germany. Let's fight this thing together." Marcus felt something shift in his chest as he realized they weren't just fighting Sarah's cancer. They were fighting for the chance to become the family that 23 years of deception had prevented them from being. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Dr. Weber can see her next week," Dr. Martinez replied. "But Marcus, you need to understand, once you commit to this path, once you uproot your lives and move to Germany for Sarah's treatment, there's no going back. This becomes your reality for the next 3 months, possibly longer." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at Lily, then back at Sarah. "It's already our reality," he said quietly. "We're just choosing to face it together instead of apart." But as they began planning their departure for Germany, none of them realized that Robert Blackwood was already putting his own plan into motion, a plan designed to destroy their reunion permanently and ensure that Marcus never chose family over business again. The fight for Sarah's life was just beginning, and the fight for their family survival was about to become more complicated than any of them imagined. The game-changing revelation came during their second week in Munich, when Marcus received a phone call that shattered everything he thought he understood about his father's manipulation. Sarah was sleeping between chemotherapy sessions, her body exhausted from the experimental treatment that was slowly but successfully shrinking her tumors. Lily was reading beside her mother's hospital bed, and Marcus was in the hallway fielding calls from Blackwood Industries when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Blackwood? This is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with the San Francisco Police Department. I need to speak with you about your father, Robert Blackwood." Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. "Is he all right?" "Sir, your father was arrested this morning on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. During our investigation, we discovered evidence that I believe you need to see immediately." 20 minutes later, Marcus was staring at digital copies of documents that Detective Rodriguez had sent to his secure email, documents that revealed the true scope of his father's deception over the past 2 decades. Robert hadn't just destroyed Marcus's relationship with Sarah 23 years ago. He had been systematically embezzling from Blackwood Industries for 15 years, using Marcus's name and reputation to cover his crimes while slowly draining the company's assets into offshore accounts. The charitable foundations Marcus thought he had been funding, Robert had stolen most of that money. The employee pension fund? Depleted. The research and development budget that Marcus believed was driving innovation? diverted to Robert's personal investments. But the most devastating discovery was a series of recorded phone conversations between Robert and various criminals he had hired over the years. Conversations that revealed Robert had been willing to destroy anyone who threatened his control over Marcus, including Sarah and Lily. Your father hired private investigators to track Sarah Chun for years after you broke up, Detective Rodriguez explained during their video call. Not to protect her, but to ensure she never contacted you successfully. When she tried to reach you during her pregnancy, he had people intercept her communications and threaten her with legal action if she continued. Marcus felt the walls of his life collapsing around him as Detective Rodriguez continued. 3 years ago, when your father learned that Sarah was working at a hospital and might potentially encounter you through business connections, he arranged for the car accident that injured her spine. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He caused Sarah's accident. The investigation is ongoing, but we have evidence suggesting he paid someone to tamper with her vehicle. He wanted to ensure she remained financially dependent and unlikely to pursue contact with you. Marcus sank into a chair in the hospital hallway, the full magnitude of his father's evil finally becoming clear. Robert hadn't just lied to them 23 years ago. He had spent the intervening decades actively destroying Sarah's life to prevent any possibility of their reunion. The chronic pain that forced Sarah to work multiple jobs while struggling to afford medication, Robert's fault. The financial stress that had shaped Lily's entire childhood, Robert's fault. The cancer treatment they couldn't afford until Marcus discovered their existence, a problem created by decades of Robert's deliberate sabotage. Marcus looked through the window at Sarah sleeping peacefully, finally receiving the medical care she needed, and felt rage unlike anything he had ever experienced. His father hadn't just stolen 23 years from their family. He had tried to kill the woman Marcus loved to prevent their reunion. The darkest hour, the darkest moment came that same afternoon, when Sarah woke up from her chemotherapy session to find Marcus crying beside her bed with a devastation she had never seen in him. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, immediately alert. Despite her exhaustion, "Is it Lily? It's my father," Marcus said, his voice breaking completely. "Sarah, I just discovered." He couldn't finish the sentence. "How do you tell the woman you love that your father has been actively trying to destroy her life for over 2 decades? Lily looked up from her book, sensing the crisis in her father's tone. "Marcus, whatever it is, just tell us." So Marcus told him everything. The embezzlement, the systematic sabotage, the arranged accident, the years of surveillance and threats designed to keep Sarah away from him. When he finished, the hospital room was silent except for the steady beep of Sarah's monitoring equipment. "He tried to kill me," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying more exhaustion than shock. "Your father tried to kill me to prevent us from reuniting. I should have seen it," Marcus said desperately. "I should have questioned why you never contacted me. I should have looked for you myself instead of believing his lies about you moving on. Marcus, I failed to protect you then, and I failed to protect you for 23 years afterward. The accident that destroyed your spine, the financial stress that forced Lily to work 3 jobs, the medical bills you couldn't afford, all of it happened because I was too weak to stand up to him." Marcus was sobbing now with a grief that had been building for decades. "I let him destroy our family. I let him hurt you. I let him steal Lily's childhood. And now you're fighting for your life with cancer while he sits in a jail cell having spent 23 years trying to kill you." Sarah struggled to sit up in her hospital bed, reaching for Marcus with hands that were weak from chemotherapy but steady with love. "Marcus, look at me." He raised his head, and Sarah saw the broken man she had fallen in love with when they were young. Vulnerable, scared, but fundamentally good in ways that no amount of Robert's manipulation could destroy. "Your father is a monster," Sarah said quietly. "But you're not your father. You chose to come back. You chose to fight for us. You chose to save my life when you could have walked away again. But the years we lost were not your choice," Lily interrupted, speaking for the first time since Marcus's revelation. "Dad, you were manipulated by a man who was willing to commit attempted murder to control your life. You were as much his victim as we were." Marcus looked at his daughter, this incredible young woman who was calling him dad for the first time, and felt something shift in his chest. "Lily, I'm angry," Lily continued. "I'm angry that we lost 23 years. I'm angry that I grew up without a father. I'm angry that Mom suffered alone while you build an empire you never wanted. She paused, tears flowing down her face. But I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the man who stole those years from all of us. And I'm grateful that we found each other before it was too late. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand with what little strength she had. Marcus, we can spend whatever time I have left grieving the years we lost, or we can spend it building the family we were meant to be. The choice is ours. The turning point, the moment that changed everything, came when Dr. Weber entered Sarah's room with news that none of them had dared to hope for. Sarah, I have your latest scan results, Dr. Weber said, his usually stoic expression carrying the hint of a smile. The experimental treatment is working better than we expected. The tumors in your liver have shrunk by 70%. The lung metastases are almost completely gone. The words hung in the air like magic. Are you saying? Sarah couldn't finish the question. I'm saying you're going to live. With continued treatment and monitoring, your prognosis is excellent. We caught it in time. The therapy is working, and your body is responding beautifully to the protocol. Marcus felt the world tilt around him as 23 years of regret transformed into infinite possibility. Sarah was going to live. They were going to have a future together. Wait, subscribe to this channel right now. Trust me, you want to see how this ends. Let's continue. The family that Robert had tried to destroy was going to survive and thrive. How long before she can travel home? Lily asked. Another 4 weeks of treatment, then a month of recovery. She should be strong enough to return to San Francisco by Christmas. Christmas. They were going to spend their first Christmas together as a family. Marcus looked at Sarah, then at Lily, then back at Sarah, and felt tears streaming down his face. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of overwhelming joy and gratitude. We made it, he whispered. We actually made it. Sarah reached for both Marcus and Lily, pulling them close in a hospital bed that suddenly felt like the center of the universe. We more than made it, she said softly. We won. The climactic resolution, the final confrontation with Robert Blackwood, happened via video call from the Munich hospital, with federal agents facilitating the communication as part of plea bargain negotiations. Robert appeared on the screen, looking smaller than Marcus remembered, diminished by orange prison clothing and the weight of his exposed crimes. Marcus, Robert said, his voice carrying none of its former authority. I hope you understand that everything I did was to protect our family legacy. You tried to kill the woman I love, Marcus replied with calm fury. You stole my daughter's childhood. You embezzled from a company that employed thousands of people. You destroyed lives for 23 years to satisfy your own prejudices and maintain control over me. I was protecting you from making the same mistake your grandfather made, choosing a woman over the family business. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was holding Lily's hand while listening to the grandfather they had never met justify attempted murder. Robert, you didn't protect me from anything. You stole the only things in life that actually mattered: love, family, authenticity. You turned me into a version of yourself, and it made me miserable for decades. And now you're throwing away everything we built for sentimentality. Now I'm reclaiming the life you stole from me. Marcus replied. I'm resigning as CEO of Blackwood Industries. I'm liquidating my shares and using the proceeds to establish a foundation that will repair the damage you caused. And I'm never speaking to you again. Marcus paused, looking at the man who had shaped his entire existence through manipulation and cruelty. You wanted to preserve the Blackwood legacy? Here's your legacy. A son who learned that love is more valuable than money. A granddaughter who understands that family is more important than status. And a woman who survived everything you tried to destroy her with. Marcus, you're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was believing you for 23 years. Marcus ended the call and turned to face his family, his real family, the people who mattered more than all the wealth his father had forced him to accumulate. It's over, he said simply. He can't hurt us anymore. The satisfying conclusion, 6 months later, Marcus stood in the garden of their new home in Marin County. Not the mansion he had inherited from his father's empire, but a comfortable house they had chosen together. Watching Sarah teach Lily to plant flowers in soil that would nurture growth instead of hiding secrets. Sarah's hair had grown back after chemotherapy, silver-streaked but beautiful. Her energy was returning daily, and her latest scans showed no trace of cancer. She was alive, healthy, and more beautiful than Marcus remembered from when they were young. Lily had enrolled at UC Berkeley as a pre-med student, determined to become the kind of doctor who could help families like theirs. But more importantly, she had gained a father she never knew she needed and the complete family she had always dreamed of. The Blackwood Industries scandal had made national news. But Marcus found he didn't care about the public attention. He was too busy learning how to be a father, a partner, and a man whose wealth served life instead of destroying it. The foundation they had established was already helping thousands of families afford medical care that insurance companies refused to cover. Sarah ran the day-to-day operations with the artistic vision that had originally attracted Marcus to her, while Lily volunteered between classes and Marcus provided the business structure that made their charitable work effective. They had become the family that Robert's manipulation had prevented 23 years ago, but stronger, wiser, more appreciative of what they had because they understood how easily it could be lost. "Marcus," Sarah called from the garden, "come help us with this rose bush. Lily thinks it should go by the kitchen window, but I think it needs more sun." Marcus walked toward his family, rolling up his sleeves to work in earth that would grow beautiful things. "What do you think, Dad?" Lily asked, holding up a small tree they had chosen together. "Kitchen window or full sun?" The word Dad still made Marcus's chest tighten with joy. He would never get tired of hearing it. "I think," Marcus said, kneeling beside them in the dirt with hands that had once signed billion-dollar contracts but now touched soil and flowers, "that whatever we plant together will be beautiful." Sarah smiled at him, the same smile that had captured his heart when they were young, the smile he had thought was lost forever. "You know what this reminds me of?" she asked. "What?" Sarah pulled up her sleeve, revealing the phoenix tattoo that had faded but never disappeared, the symbol of rising from ashes that had defined their entire love story. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually rose from the ashes." Marcus reached for her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin and the steady pulse of her heartbeat. Proof that she was alive, that they had won, that love had triumphed over everything that tried to destroy it. "We did more than rise," he said, looking at Sarah and Lily, at his family, his heart, his real wealth. "We became something beautiful." As the sun set over their garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus Blackwood understood that the most shocking thing about his story wasn't his emotional breakdown in a restaurant when he learned he had a daughter. The most shocking thing was discovering that true wealth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the people you loved enough to fight for. The phoenix tattoos they both carried were no longer symbols of surviving tragedy. They were symbols of the love that had waited 23 years to come home. And finally it had. If you're new to this channel, subscribe to this channel right now.